I'm live now. Thank God. Hello and good evening for those in the UK and those who are in Europe. Welcome to another great episode of Atheism and Agnosticism under Scrutiny. And we've been going through a good number of 20 odd weeks now, probably coming up to close to 30 now. I forgot to add the number, but I'll do that next time. But it's probably close to 30 weeks where we've really put the challenge out there for atheists and our agnostic friends to try and provide some evidence why we should believe there is no God or no creator of the universe. We have the ability to create the heavens and the earth as we know it. But somehow there's some other way that they believe it all came about. And it's been interesting to hear some of the challenges, which we ourselves haven't been very convinced of, I will admit, because one of the obvious ones is trying to prove that something can come from nothing. I think that's going to be interesting, if not slightly hilarious, from the evidence I've seen or the lack of evidence. The second one, which is of an angle, is when you can't provide a good explanation. We call it the gaps theory. Let's just throw billions of years at it. And if we go back enough billions of years, eventually at some point, it all came about or it all began. And then with all those billions of years, we can have this tiny, tiny gradual step through those billions of years to create the universe as we know it. Again, another very farcical, I would say, and we would certainly say farcical claim, because where's the evidence for it? And one of the challenges we had last week was, if this is gradual evidence, doesn't matter how long ago it was, it would continue. It wouldn't just stop. It would continue because it's just a biological, natural process of some sort with some level of randomness, which means we should still see some sort of evidence of that gradual step-by-step process, which means we should see samples of this transitional stage where some cases haven't fully formed yet. Doesn't matter how long ago it is. If something happened 4 million years ago, and it takes 26 million years for a fully formed material body to be complete, then there'll be some cases where it'll be halfway complete in 2024, it'll be 99% complete or whatever. So where's the examples of cases where certain things that started 26 million years ago, or in maybe some other cases only 10 million years ago, therefore if there were 26-mile life form to be created, they will only be 40% on the way. Why haven't we got samples of that? So it doesn't matter whether you shove or chuck billions of years at these things. Where's the transitional progress to show we have examples of that process? Because from that logic, there should still be cases. It's not a case that everything started 26 million, billion, whatever number of years ago. Everything was fully formed, and then in the years that we know it, which is the last 6,000-7,000 years of known human existence, we're at a stage where there isn't any cases of this continuing, this process continuing. That, again, makes no logic, because these things that form are part of a evolutionary process. And those process means that this process itself does not ever stop. It continually processes. Living forms die, new cells are created from those cells. The evolutionary process continues. So it's not a one-time thing, it's a continuous thing that will occur and still occurs to date. The only difference is, what type of evolutionary process do we know that exists now? From a micro perspective, we do see from the intelligence and sophistication of cells, it has the ability from a number of cells coming together to then form a fully formed plant or body or whatever it may be. And we see that in nature. We see the scientific evidence of that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the origin of how cells and molecular structures can literally form from nothing or from no intelligent design. And this is where we got what we call macroevolution. This is where we've really been putting the pressure out there, looking at cell structures, looking at transitions or forms of bodies that we are aware of but need to fully form. How does that happen outside of any intelligent design? And that's really the challenge that we put out there. And we certainly haven't had that fully provided as evidence yet. But we're kind enough to keep that going. Give you atheists and agnostics still the opportunity to put your case. Now, we did have a couple of guys that joined last week, which I'm going to cover one of the areas that they mentioned, and that is, apart from, of course, they can't prove things existed billions of years ago, we can actually have evidence that, certainly from an Earth point of view, which is the only thing we can truly examine, because we can't examine planets that are outside our range. We just don't have the technology to go that far. So what we have as our best evidence is the Earth itself. And of course, that helps because the claim is still valid, where a lot of atheists claim that the Earth is billions of years old. And what we're going to say is that is not true for a very good reason. In fact, there's a number of good reasons. So we're going to touch on that as well, to prove that the Earth cannot be that old. In fact, what we call it is the young Earth. The Earth is only around 6,500 years old. It's definitely not into the crazy billions of years old. And we're going to touch on that tonight as well, to demonstrate that that is, from a scientific perspective, a more valid argument. So it's not from just our biblical argument based on the biblical context of how the Earth is written in the Bible, which, when we work it out, that computes around 6,500 years old. That is not the only thing we're looking at. That's our basis as Christians to believe that the Earth is 6,500 years, because the source, the Bible, tells us that, and we believe that is a source coming from God, the creator of all things. So if the creator is telling us it's 6,500 years, that is one of the strong reasons why we believe it. But it doesn't stop there, of course. We do have evidence to also back it from a scientific perspective. And I haven't really gone into that much, but because it was raised last week, we are going to touch on the new Earth, which ties into the biblical account. This is the beauty of it. It actually shows not only one, of course, we have no evidence of humans existing beyond 6,500 years, certainly nothing like 10,000, 30,000, 1 million years ago. As hard as they tried to come up with some evidence, science has proven there is no case of any human, in terms of any archaeological evidence, to suggest that man did exist those million years ago, or whatever number of years they add. The new Earth does tie in nicely to the records we also have of human life, and the records that we have of the aging of human life. But it does get better. I know it's not a conclusive way of proving it scientifically, because humans is just one small element of the Earth. There's all the rocks, foundations, the seas, lava. There's lots of different aspects to the Earth which also give away very major clues to its age. And we're going to look at some of those tonight as well. So what was our challenges last week? So there were three. We'll quickly remind people what those three were. Number one, let's see if I can just share my screen so you can, for those who are watching, can see. I appreciate some people may be only watching the recording, but at least this will be an aid for when they do watch it to see what those challenges were. Now, number one, provide evidence that the source of the universe cannot come from intelligent design. So what's the evidence that you can prove that the universe didn't come from intelligent design? And if so, what is the alternative? What's the evidence that the universe came from a non-intelligent basis? whichever way you want to structure that, that's the first challenge anyway. The second is the evidence into the source of morality. Now, this hasn't really been touched yet. So, but that is claim number 2. Is if we are just something that just comes from nothing and we're just random beings that just form from whatever process, random process, would not all our morals be very subjective and very random and very chaotic in many respects? Who is to say what is true? But yet we have a clear, innate understanding of what morality is. The difficulty is how we achieve it as individuals, but we do agree on those basic concepts, the concepts of love, kindness, being reasonable, honest, genuine, true, and so on. So, there are many of these qualities that even though we may have some form of views on some of the minor details, we conceptually agree on all these core areas of morality. And that for me means that morality has got to be ultimately objective, because otherwise, who's to say what is true? What laws should we abide by? Why should we necessarily be friendly to people? Why should we care about people? Why would there be anything wrong with just taking other people's lives for your own benefit? And the list goes on. But we can see that this really wouldn't tie up to how we understand humanity. So it's a challenge that we would like to take to the atheist. If there is no God, what's your source of morality? Evidence, finally, was the challenge of the death, resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, we have touched it in other areas. We will do as well in more detail later on in the streams, but it's just a basic challenge for now, is based on the evidence that we do have. Now, this is more of a historical case that we have, a very strong historical case of that Jesus existed and that Jesus was crucified and he died through crucifixion. He was dead for 3 days and then he was resurrected, witnessed to be alive after 3 days. That is obviously a very significant event because it shows something that is supernatural, something that just simply wouldn't occur under normal natural conditions. So this is a very, very significant event because it really does demonstrate the act of a supernatural event. And that then opens the door to further questions of who is Jesus and so on. Of course, we do have a quick reminder for Fridays, which is the stream after this one. Tomorrow, same time, we do cover Christianity, which is where we as Christians wholeheartedly believe that the death and resurrection of Christ is from the God that we believe in, the Christian God that we believe in. It's the only true God. And if you want to challenge that, you can do so on the Friday streams. And we're happy for us to be scrutinized too. And we're hoping through that process that you will start to appreciate that God is real. And the God that is real is a God that we believe has a son, Jesus Christ. And it's only through him you can receive eternal life. So there's a big promise and reward for those who truly believe in him. And that's the main reason why we take this very, very seriously and why we encourage people to consider Jesus Christ in their lives. And that's all part of the Christian perspective. And that, again, as I said, is covered on a Friday. So coming back to us, we welcome everyone. In the comments, we do welcome. We have already Rest a While, y'all. Welcome. Unique. Jeremiah, welcome. Tinny D, blessings to you too. Welcome to tonight's stream. We usually have a few others, but they haven't joined us yet. Hopefully they will be joining soon. Sigma Waves, hi there. Anybody that would like to join the stage, has questions or would like to get involved in the discussion, especially around these challenges, of course, then do let us know in the private chat. And if we don't know you from before, then just provide a little intro We will also ask you to briefly come on the video and let us know who you are visually, just to make sure that you are who you claim. And from that, we can then add you to the stage. We're not just going to add people just on the basis of you potentially could be a genuine person. We are going to make sure that we are going to have a level of screening to ensure we do have genuine people that are here to ask genuine questions, to be allowed on the stage so that we can have very healthy discussion. I'm sad to say there are some people that have other motives, and we, of course, will not entertain that at all. So again, welcome everyone. No private chats yet, that's fine. Comments are coming through, so welcome. Yes, that's right, Unique. It would only be me who could be able to see anyone that does show their face. So what we are going to cover, as I said, we're going to cover, apart from these 3 challenges, we're going to look at young Earth. Because as part of the evidence is, if atheism is true based on any kind of evolutionary process, that absolutely relies on an aging process that needs to be millions of years at least. So thousands of years would never cut it, because the transitional evolutionary process just simply could not work in such a relative time period. It needs to be the millions of years. So if, for example, the Earth can be proven in a very strong way that it cannot be millions of years old, that again puts the atheist and agnostic in a very difficult position to substantiate their claim. So we're going to quickly look at that. I'm going to just briefly cover, well, there doesn't seem to be anybody joining or coming forward just yet. So let me use this opportunity to just cover very briefly, in summary, what this young Earth is. Now, apart from the very obvious, a young Earth simply means that the very beginning of the existence of the Earth is not millions of years old or billions of years old. It's much, much younger than that. And the evidence is it's only around 6.5-ish thousands of years. We don't have a precise date, but of course, thousands of years versus millions, we've got a lot of room to handle that claim, because if we're out by 1,000 years, it's still a young Earth, but it's going to be nowhere near millions. You can't go from 6,500 with a little bit of a deviation or rounding or whatever you want to call it to end up into the millions. The distinction is too great. It can either be a young Earth or an old Earth. And what we're going to do is look at 3 factors. There are 4 factors involved. One of them I'm not going to touch, only because I haven't done much research on it. One of them is around rock layers. And one of the best examples we have, and this is what makes this so profound, is it's not some little small specimen of rock that we may look at, which could be somewhat speculative. We're talking about some major events and major rock areas. So from a rock layer perspective, our best example, of course, is the Grand Canyon, and no one can deny the existence of the Grand Canyon and the amazing rock formation it holds. But it's more than just a rock formation. It provides unbelievable evidence towards the aging of the Earth. And we will go into that in a minute, but that is one of the areas that, because of the way rocks form, there is a form of where it kind of bends into layers. And it does this without fracturing, and instead it softens through what is called a very high heating process. But if it bends without this process, it then has to question the process, because it's the millions of years that it requires to form this process is where, if that process can be clearly proven to be non-accurate, then it would clearly prove to the evolutionists that they simply cannot provide the evidence to prove it. And one of the biggest events that goes against this creation of the layers and the way the evolutionist claims is the fact that we had a very major catastrophic event that also supports this claim that it's a young Earth, and that is, of course, the catastrophic event of the flood. And of course, there's significant evidence that the flood was a real event. So we do know there is the Grand Canyon, and we also do know there is the explanation behind why it's a young Earth in the way that these rocks were formed, because the catastrophe of the flood would explain it. And we do know there is evidence that the flood definitely existed, as described and recorded in Genesis or the Bible. So that's number one that we got. The second is soft tissue in fossils. So, there's this whole thing about how amazing fossils are preserved and supposedly layers over millions of years ago. And one of the examples was a limb from the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and how flexible the connective tissue was and its blood vessels and all these things that were even intact. But according to evolutionists, these dinosaurs were over 65 million years old, but the laboratory studies show that this is in no way possible. It's just not likely for that biological material to be more than a number of thousands of years. The reason being is it just wouldn't stay and be secured in such a good condition as that, in terms of its connectivity, blood tissues, etc., that where these are intact can only occur in thousands of years. If it's millions, it's just not biologically possible. So we don't have any cases where we have any evidence of any of these kind of creatures that are, shall we say, in a form that's so decayed and what have you, that would substantiate the millions of years. What we do have is the evidence, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex, I can pronounce it, that it clearly, because of the state of its condition, and there was, as I said, still a level of connective tissue and blood vessel that is intact, but it clearly can only be thousands of years old. But that, again, that's part of a new event that's taken place. So that's the main three. There's also rapidly decaying magnetic fields, something called the faint sun paradox, helium in radioactive rocks, carbon-14 in fossils, again providing some strong evidence that creation is young. Radiocarbon cannot remain naturally in substances for millions of years because of the way that it decays relatively rapidly. So again, for this reason, it can only be obtained in ages of tens of thousands, not any more than that, based on that rate of deterioration. Again, more scientific evidence behind the case that the young Earth is a young Earth. There's also something called short-lived comets, the level of salt in the sea, the DNA in ancient bacteria. It's a lot, and we are going to cover all this at some point. We are going to get into the detail of all this young Earth evidence, which will be, for us, a very, very strong evidence why, again, we cannot believe in the evolutionary process that is millions of years old, because the evolutionary process that evolutionists believe in has to be millions of years old. It's the only way that hypothesis can work. So if the million years is just simply not possible, it debunks the evolutionary theory pretty hands down. And just to be more, what's a good word here, due diligent with this case, is we're taking up, I'd say we've got 8 to 10 different areas. So we'll cover a couple tonight, but we're going to cover all this in detail over time to really prove that a young Earth is absolutely only feasible, genuine case of the origin of this Earth. And that would be a real dilemma for those evolutionists out there. for obvious reasons. Who have we got? Let's check in here. Yeah, so we got some new people here. Let's just check in the chat. Welcome, Romeo David. Welcome to the stream. Who else we got? Just doing a little bit of admin here. Bin Kaka. Yes, according to the Bible, it's 6,000 years old, roughly. Yes, somewhere in that ballpark. And this is the great thing. The evidence, the good, strong, latest current evidence is that the Earth is more believable around that date. Of course, these calculations are not super accurate, but they don't have to be, because the distinction between thousands of years, say in this case 6,000, 7,000 years, is very different to millions. So if the evidence is clearly much more closer to 6,000, 7,000 years, then we know millions of years is simply not feasible at all. And that's really the case. We're not looking at precise. There is a level of, degree of accuracy. It's not 100% accurate, but if you're looking at margins here, it could be out by 10%. Say 10% of 6,000 is not going to get you a million years. So you know it's down to where the scientific evidence is closer to being accurate. That is going to be the case for the age of the Earth. And as I say, nothing has come forward that suggests this Earth is anything more than 6,000 to 7,000 years old. Therefore, what we're calling young Earth. So as that was brought up last week, I don't know if that chap who brought that up, I forgot his name. Hopefully he will join the stream and get involved in that discussion. But for those who are listening, I do challenge you to look at the evidence around a young Earth, look at the latest scientific evidence, and we're going to quickly go into some detail on some of the points I raised to help you with that. But I do recommend you doing some research. Definitely look up. There are many, many books. Do not just take what your school teacher tells you, what your atheist friend necessarily tells you, and so on. But I really just highly recommend that you do proper research. Look at the evidence from both ends. Look at what the Christian view has, because they are looking at scientific evidence as well. We are not shy of that. We know it will support our belief that the Earth is young, and therefore we're confident. And so far, that confidence has prevailed, which is no surprise to us. But all the latest scientific evidence is very clearly that we do have a young Earth. Mahir, welcome. Please do let me know what your view is. What's your position? What's your worldview? In other words, let us know, because if you're interested in joining or getting involved in discussions, then we'll be keen to know what your position is, because we are really looking for atheists and agnostics. We're happy to discuss with others if it's productive and it's in line with the subject matter, but we're not looking at discussing other religions or beliefs or other worldviews, only because we are covering them. We have on a Monday, we have Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy and other forms of orthodoxy that surround that form of belief system. On Mondays, Tuesdays, we have Judaism. Wednesdays, we have Islam. And tonight, in fact, earlier, we did have one, which I can't remember precisely, but it's some form of Indian religions, I think, and Buddha and all those sort of other kind of, what would you call, sort of scarce, well, not so scarce, but sort of other forms anyway of other religions, certainly from an Indian perspective. We know there's Hinduism on a Thursday as well. So thank you, Unique, for reminding me. Thanks for that. So yes, it's Hinduism on a Friday. I think it's 5 o'clock UK time. So if you want anybody that believes in Hinduism or any of those forms of religions, Buddhism, etc., then you are welcome to join on Thursday at 5 p.m. UK time. So that will be a separate link that will be out for that as well. We do, of course, on Fridays. So let's not forget Friday. We even are happy for our Christian position, our Christian worldview, to also be challenged, and that's going to be scrutinized on a Friday. Good evening, Josh. Welcome to the stream. So, if there's nobody joining at this precise time, which it doesn't look like there is, let's get into the detail of the young Earth. Now, one of the ones I want to cover tonight is what we call these folded rock layers. So let me quickly explain what this is. So it's basically where rock is bent. It's normally at cracks and breaks, as you can imagine. Rock can only bend without fracturing if it's softened by extreme heating, or when the sediments have not yet fully hardened. There are numerous locations around the world, as I mentioned, where we can observe massive sections of this tightly folded rock layer without the evidence of the sediments being heated. So that's a very important point, because if it's not being heated over millions of years, how can it be tightly folded? An example I mentioned is the Grand Canyon. And this is the major problem, is that if the rock layers that were laid down gradually over millions of years, how is it that it makes sense that the layers were formed in a more rapid succession? Because it can only be through a much quicker process, because there was this not gradual heating process evident in the rock layers. So Grand Canyon is an example, and therefore you have to ask, how can rock layers without that heating process of millions of years be formed? Well, we do have a very, very good case for this, and that is the flood. We would need something that could form those rock layers in a much quicker process, and of course the scientists have agreed that something like the flood would explain it. So all we would need is evidence that there was a flood, and of course we do have that evidence. So we do have an evidence of the flood. The scientists do agree that that would explain why we don't have the case of where we see that heating of rock layers over millions of years demonstrative in the rock layers in the Grand Canyon. So what is the alternative? Is if it's therefore done over a different process which softens it only because it's happened over a short period of time. And for that event to take place, something like a flood would be able to then create and form these layers rapidly. And therefore, as we do have evidence of the flood, we do have the case of the evidence behind it. My apologies, I just had to take a quick call. So that's the evidence of the rock layers could not have been through heating, because we've got no evidence of the long-term heating process of millions of years. But we do have the softening effect that would be only existing, that could happen over a short period of time if something like the event of a flood to explain it. And as I say, we do have the Genesis account of there was a flood, which has been, of course, scientifically confirmed through archaeologists, etc., that there was a flood back in the biblical accounts. So that's something you evolutionists have really, and atheists have really got to have a serious think about. Speaking of soft tissue, number 2 is soft tissue in fossils. Now, I must admit, this was quite interesting for me as well. I didn't really know this previously to this level. So let me just run this by you. Latest discoveries is the findings over the very wonderfully preserved biological materials that we have found in rock layers and fossils. One of the recent ones was over the fossilization of a Tyrannosaurus rex femur, which is, if I remember right, it's either the arm or the leg, one of the parts of the body, which was flexible connective tissue and had branching blood vessels intact. according to evolutionists, these dinosaur tissues are more than 65 million years old. Why is that an issue? Because in no way is it possible for biological material, like we mentioned, to last more than thousands of years. You can't have these blood vessels and connective tissues intact if they were millions of years ago. So again, this is really challenging the view, again, that the Earth is millions of years old, because we have evidence of creatures that exist millions of years based on their aging process. We can clearly see that aging process is clearly invalid for that reason. If we know, therefore, we have clear evidence that dinosaurs that we have evidence of lived around so many thousands of years ago, again, this is very, very good evidence that we have a young Earth, because it ties in nicely to that. So we talked about bent folded rock layers. We have also briefly mentioned about fossils. Let's see, what else can we cover? I'll tell you what we will cover. Rapidly decaying magnetic field. So like other planets, the Earth has a magnetic field that is decaying quite rapidly. We are now able to measure the rate of this magnetic energy that is being depleted and develop models to explain the data. Scientists have invented this, what we call dynamo model of the Earth's core, to explain how the field could have lasted over such a long period. But this model failed to adequately explain the data for the rapidly decay and the rapid, what they call reversals, that has undergone in the past. It cannot also account for the magnetic fields of other planets, such as Neptune and Mercury. The creationist model, however, based on the Genesis flood, effectively simply explains that the data in regards to the Earth's magnetic field provides striking evidence that the Earth can only be thousands of years old, not millions. Isn't that unbelievably interesting? And I will just touch on one more, because it is kind of connected in terms of decay process, and that carbon-14 in fossils. Apart from attempting to prove that through this, the evidence is that therefore the Earth is millions of years, it actually proves that the evidence that the Earth is young. Radiocarbon-14 can only remain naturally in substances for billions of years because of its delay relatively rapidly. For this reason, it can only be obtained in ages of tens of thousands of years, not millions. So again, the way in which the radiocarbon decay exists and the calculation of its decaying process rate, if you like, simply could not happen over millions of years. And therefore, because of that rapid decay, the calculations can only suggest it must be only thousands of years, not millions. Scientists from the radioisotopes and the age of the Earth project examine diamonds of evolutionists considered to be 1.2 billion years old to the Earth's history. Diamonds are the hardest known substance and extremely resistant to contamination through chemical exchange. Yet, the rate that scientists discovered significant detectable levels of radiocarbon in these diamonds date them from around 55 years old, a far cry to evolutionary billions of years. So, of course, when we say 55,000 years, it's an approximation, of course, but what it means is, again, it goes well within the realms of thousands of years, not billions. You cannot get with any level of approximation or margin to calculate something that's been calculated to potentially decay in a maximum around, say, 55,000 years to be plausible that it could result in an evolutionary decay process that would take billions of years. And of course, the great thing about diamonds is that it's not such a volatile type of material. It's a very, very strong, secure material, and therefore its radiocarbon decay rate would be very, very good evidence to how old this material is. And as I say, no material of diamonds has ever been calculated to be nothing more than thousands of years old. So you cannot go from thousands of years old to all of a sudden explain millions. And this is the beauty of this. All these different cases are all confirming for certain of a young Earth potential. What it's not doing is providing any evidence that it could be a potential millions of years. And this is the difference. If the evolutionary process cannot really be substantiated from an atheist or agnostic position, based on the scientific theories that they have, that it has to, by default, be only potential if it was over millions of years. And then we see in every single case of all the material evidence we have in terms of rock formations, in terms of life, in terms of radiocarbon, in terms of fossilization, and so on, that all point to now, based on latest scientific evidence, that there's just no way these kings could have been calculated to exist millions of years, only thousands of years. It really then squashes the whole theory of how atheists come across and substantiate the million years of theory. The reason why the millions of years need to exist is because it's not having an intelligent mind behind it. It's purely a random biological mutational process that just, therefore, by that inference, can only really exist if you just leave it long enough. And to leave those things based on the evidence we do have, when you leave something just sitting there without any intelligent input, you do, of course, appreciate. You can go back in 10 years and you'll see no difference. You can go back in 1,000 years, you'll see very little difference, if anything. So we just don't have any evidence of any kind of transitional process that can occur rapidly on its own from that perspective, which is why they have to go into just throw billions of years at it. Because if something is so incredibly slow in its transitional state, then where it's almost unmentionable, then the easy answer is to throw some stupid number at it, to say billions upon to the power of a billion to the power of 20 billion or whatever silly number you want to add, and say that is the number of years that you could say that if you gave it that amount of time, then the very tiniest of possible incremental advancements in molecular form could then, of course, occur to a point where you do get from basic molecular structure to, say, fully formed being. But with that level of case, as I said at the very beginning, why don't we see some transitional cases where because don't forget, they don't all start at the very beginning. Some of them start 20 billion years ago, and of course it will continue. So because there's cells that die, new ones come about, this process not only would have potentially occurred billions of years, but it would continually occur. So it means that we'll have cases where you have something that's potentially fully formed. You have cases that are 90% fully formed. You have cases that are just 1% fully formed, and so on. You should see all the different scale of transition of this form, irrespective of how many billions of years it started. I hope you can get my point there. And if that's the case, where's the evidence? And the way we get the evidence, just to take this one step further, is the evidence should be compiled by a process that can actually age whatever we do discover in terms of fossils. There's also something about radioactive decay as well. There's this mathematical calculation of I forgot what it was. I did learn it at school when I did my advanced maths and all that, physics. But it was something about decay factors, and that is, again, there's a decaying aging process which is very similar to what we discussed here with the fossilization, decay, and all the rest of it, that even when you take that into account, it cannot happen based on the evidence we have over millions of years. The evidence has clearly shown it cannot be over millions of years because we don't have that heated evidence of it being heated over millions of years. Muslims call me atheist. I think you've been on the stage before, haven't you? I am going to let you on, have a quick chat, but I do ask you just to be respectful and and that'll be fine. I mean, obviously, if there any change to that, I will have to take you off stage. But otherwise, welcome and introduce. Hi there.
Shalom, salam, assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
So your question, I see. How can we explain the origin of the one cell?
Yeah.
Very easily. You can use the chapter 1 of Genesis and go into verse.
Yeah.
Of all life, where it comes from. So, for instance.
No. Okay. Apologies there, but we have actually a good reason to not add you to the stage, unfortunately. So I can't unfortunately let you on the stage for now. I will follow this up, but we have reasons why we can't let you on, and so we are being very, very strict with you. I've had some people coming on that haven't been very genuine, so going to be a bit more careful to who we do allow on. So that's that. But by all means, if you genuinely want to come on and discuss and challenge the atheist or our worldview by trying to put the case for the atheist position or agnostic position that you believe there isn't a God, you're welcome to join us. So how's the comments coming along anyway? What have we got here? Who believes in there's one God and believe in three gods in one person will go to hell with our Jake? It's not very impressive if you're going to make crazy, stupid comments like that. We're not impressed. But then that's Islam for you. You're meant to believe the previous scriptures. That's in your crazy Quran. You do actually have areas where you're meant to believe, and then you don't even understand it. So, but if you want to really make that discussion, then you can come on Wednesday nights. So you missed it last night. We have Islam. If you want to come on Islam and put your case, I have a feeling you're not going to join because I think you're going to struggle to put your case. Because when people make these kind of crazy little, whatever you want to call it, comments, it just kind of shows one's sort of true colours. But if somebody wants to come on board and have a proper, healthy and friendly discussion, then of course the way they introduce themselves is quite different to the way that unfortunately Sheikh here has introduced himself. So Sheikh, yes, we're not impressed at all. And if you continue with kind of comments like that, we will completely ban you. Not a problem. We are looking for genuine people that really care, that really are looking for truth. Everyone. I mean, I remember there was a case where we were talking to some people the other day about whether there's a God, and they say, "Well, why can't your Bible just say Jesus is God or whatever like that?" You know, if anybody just went around to say, "Oh, I'm God," I could just say I'm God. How does that provide evidence there is a God? or that person is God. Because anyone can go around saying that. What we want is have evidence that cannot be refuted, evidence that cannot be argued by just simply saying, well, whether you say so or you do not say so. We're not naive to think that would be a good enough reason. So just like with the Quran, which on a Wednesday makes lots of claims, where's the evidence to back it up? And that's what we're looking for, but we're not going to discuss that tonight. That's on a Wednesday. And so therefore, that's pretty much that on that matter. Brother Knight, hello Ray. Jeremiah 31, very good. Hearts that seeks all love and peace in the name of Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you, Brother Knight. This is why we do what we do, because we have a real, genuine connection with a loving God. And that loving God represented himself in the most loving way to come on the earth to die for us. And that is in the name of Jesus Christ, who was a clear person that died, rose again after 3 days, which is why we've got it in one of our claims. Wasn't in our daily claim, but we have got the claim, the evidence of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We have fantastic evidence of the existence of Jesus, the death of the crucifixion of Christ, and the resurrection in 3 days. Yes, Sheikh, you really don't know what you're talking about. Of course, we do believe there is one God. They all, the other prophets believe there is one God, but that is not where it ends. They also believe that God was the Father, and the Father had a Son, and they believe that it had a spirit, as recorded in its Tanakh. So you don't understand the full picture. That you need to get into the detail. You need to read the Old Testament, which is what the prophets believe. That's their source of documentation. And in there, it clearly shows the evidence of who the true God is. If you bother to read it properly, which I guess you haven't done, because you're making such obviously clear flaws in your argument, which is quite hilarious. But as I said, if you really want to make this debate, you can do it two ways. If you want to challenge the Christian position, come on the stream tomorrow. If you want to support and defend your ideology as a Muslim, then please come on a Wednesday, because we will cover that on that stream. So we're not going to cover it tonight. So that is the end of that matter. Have we got to cover the mirror? Yes, indeed. Rest a while. What have we got here? More comments. Yes, the Godhead is the Father, Word and Spirit. Exactly. I would just, you guys, appreciate your comments, but I would just recommend not to make too much of a discussion with this guy, because it may just distract from what we're trying to achieve tonight. But as I say, he can come on Wednesdays for Islam and Christianity. If it's going to be more of a direct challenge to Christianity, then he's more than welcome to join Friday if he behaves himself, of course. That'll be the other catch. But well, yeah, please don't entertain this guy anymore if you can, because this is not the time and the stream. Pardon me, the stream for that. And that's not being disrespectful, but we have a bit, a focus about why we believe that atheism and agnosticism is not true, but we're happy to listen to their challenges. So we're coming up to 9 o'clock now. So we're getting another really stupid comment, no surprise, from another crazy Muslim. I'm sorry, Sheikh, whatever your name is, just terrible argument, very, very, very poor. So I'm not even going to entertain you. It's just so ridiculous. So let's just ignore that. Thanks, Unique. Yeah, Jeremiah. It just goes to show the extreme desperation of these Muslims. A terrible, terrible religion, so deceived and so fraught of violence and oppression and a lack of humanity over people, especially over women. The treatment of women is quite horrendous, as I discovered, purely from the Quran itself. It's quite shocking. So clearly not from God, clearly from some other source, shall we say. Enough said, of course, about that. And you're right, Josh. They certainly don't like the history. The history is really quite severe indeed. So yeah, back into this. We've got a case where we're saying the Earth is very young. The process of, again, what's required for the atheist to be true is the Earth needs to be billions and billions of years old, or millions and millions of years old. That's a minimum. But please provide me with some evidence, whether it's fossils, give me some specific fossils which have been discovered, unearthed, where the scientists have done their calculations with the right level of evidence to prove it's millions of years old. My claim is you're not going to find one single case. Some of the cases that were found, which were suggested to be millions of years, have now been debunked, because now with a more accurate aging methodology, it's clearly proven to be, can only be into the thousands, not millions. Now you may ask yourself, how can you make such a mistake? Well, I'm going to give some credit here to the atheists. And that is, they're told based on scientists, or even the scientists may be atheists themselves, of course, but on the basis that they're making calculations of what they thought is good, accurate methodology. But where we have an issue, is, sorry, show Mohammed, you've been banned, so enough said with you. What we have appreciated is, if an atheist is genuine about the understanding of millions of years, and that's fine, we'll give you some benefit of doubt. But if you're genuine about truth and genuine about the evidence, then you've got to be able to be genuine and honest enough to appreciate that these understandings and calculations have now been proven to be not accurate. And in fact, the accuracy now and the latest technologies and methodologies used to age these fossils and aging process that I mentioned have now been clearly changed. And now the scientists are coming back to agree that they got it wrong, because they're now confirming that it can only be thousands of years old. Now, of course, that doesn't mean every single scientist that's an atheist believe in that. But those are the ones who've done their proper due diligence in terms of study and analysis on the evidence that has now been provided with the latest technology. So you still will have people that say, oh no, it's still millions of years. And the thing with that, if that's the case, where is the evidence for that? Because it simply is not the case. And if you're really going to be genuine about your belief, then of course you would you definitely have the case that you have the evidence to provide for it. And that we are at least still giving you the opportunity. At least if you really are genuine about proving it, we are still giving you another week or so to continue to come back to us with the evidence. We still haven't had it. I think we're 28, 29 weeks in now. That's a lot of weeks. I'm not surprising it might end up with be a year where we still haven't had the case. So far, still no responses. So what I will do is I'm just gonna, the best use of, maybe if there is no more responses, I'm gonna probably close early tonight. But we'll just probably go through, maybe use one more half an hour just to go through some more points that are worth at least thinking about. in the case of the origin of the universe. Scientific evidence of God. Science discovered ample evidence that the universe had a beginning, in the way that the galaxies were expanding, and they had been much closer together in the past. Science have found that the universe is to be incredibly fine-tuned for life. Over 30 constants or laws of physics that govern the universe. All are unrelated to each other, yet they are finely tuned to incredible proportions to make life possible. Why is that important? Because the more we talk about precision on things that are not directly related, increases the probability of it just happening to be far, far less, to the point of where it becomes just completely just not meaningful. And therefore, again, it also points to the fact that it must therefore come from some sort of intelligent design. It can't just have happened. It's way, way too unlikely. Scientists can't explain the origin of life and its genetic code apart from an originator. So this is my point. Biologists have found that life began with an enormous amount of precise information, or we looked at last week, embedded in the cell, just phenomenal, with over 3 billion genetic letters, all precisely ordered to give instructions to the cell. I mean, random? I don't think so. More scientists have never found inorganic matter to create a coded system of information and machinery to interpret it. Isn't that interesting? Science have proven that biological life runs by millions of existingly programmed and robotic machines. Again, part of this incredible reality of incredible sophistication within a cell, how it amazingly can form with that level of complexity. It's just absolutely. In fact, one biochemist, Michael Denton, describes the cell this way. I think this is a nice quote, actually. To grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify a cell 1 billion times until it is 20 kilometers in diameter and resembles a giant airship large enough to cover a great city like London or New York. What we would have seen would have been an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. There again, that in itself demonstrates intelligence, doesn't it? It does not provide evidence of random, unintelligent formation. Science has found the earliest evidence of life to be of great variety, fully formed without transitions. And this is the bit I was mentioning earlier. So a paleontologist, Niles Eldredge, admitted if life had evolved into wondrous profusion of creatures, little by little, then there should be some phosphorus record, which is like I was saying, some of the staging effects where you would see some of these changes. But no one has found any evidence of such in-between creatures. All the fossils evidence date has failed to turn into anything other than missing links, and therefore, without those missing links, you've got no basis to prove that that transitional process did exist over millions of years, etc. Issue with evolution. There are 4 major ideas. Life comes from non-life. We really haven't had anybody come forward with a case to prove that there is life from non-life. All forms of life as we know it come from a single cell form. However, the only single life form we are aware of is bacteria. We have no evidence of a 2-cell life form, a 3-cell life form. So we cannot say for certain how all life forms from a single cell life form. That's a really good point, isn't it? Time and chance drive evolution forward. The big chance of a simple cell 100-unit protein coming together by accident is a very, very, very big number. do apologize, I was just eating my ice cream. I highly recommend salted caramel. Anyway, it's one of my favorites. Anyway, back to this. Minor genetic variation in species is evidence of macroevolution. And of course, we know that's not true. Because all the genes that exist today, you can shuffle them around, but they are all, that there's no new genes that are created. Okay. Very interesting point, isn't it? Does evolution, in other words, stack up to scientific discovery? Darwin, of course, was a very good exponent to the evolutionary theory, probably the most well-known individual over history, comes forward as one of the main, as I say, opponents of evolution. But of course, back at the time when he was putting this forward, didn't have the knowledge of the complexity of the cells. So there was a whole bundle of assertions made to explain his theory. But now that we do know how incredibly complex cells are, and the things I mentioned already, then of course the issue that scientific research has calculated the chance of this occurring 1 times 10 to the trillion of the power of a trillion. So there's your probability, which is my favorite subject of all. That's my thing. The probability is the probability of a calculation just by chance to occur into life forms is 1 times 10 to the trillion to the power of a trillion. That means 10 trillion times 10 trillion, a trillion times, which is so ridiculously small that it is as good as it being impossible. I mean, if you had to rely on anything occurring, maybe like the lottery ticket, that the chance of winning the lottery ticket was 10 trillion to the power of a trillion, then it's never going to happen, of course. And of course, that's really where we've got the issue. To help create a brand new form of organism, a mutation form must affect the gene that does its job early and controls the expression of all other genes to come into play, so that the organism can grow. Evidence that there is absolutely no examples of the intuitive of mutations that have affected early development of any body play as a whole and are not fatal. So, of course, any kind of body play, pupillary random process would generally, of course, as far as we have any examples, would simply fail. And it'd be fatal, of course. It would just collapse because the precision required is so incredibly precise that any variation that would simply not allow the cell to form. So it's really just talking about why would you put your faith in something so ridiculously unlikely? And yet, you atheists out there, how many things far more likely do you still not believe in because you're still not comfortable with it? Maybe, well, one, you wouldn't believe you'd ever win the lottery. That's only 1 in 10 million or whatever. It's much more likely than something that's 10 trillion to the power of a trillion. Why are you believing something that's far less likely? The things that you do not have trust in that are more likely. Again, that really does beg the question, doesn't it? Early or late development have issues. Early inevitable destroys the organism. Too many things downstream to rely on in early development. Later development not makes sense as the organism is already constructed. This is what they call the construction dilemma. The evidence suggests to Mayer that an intelligent designer must have been responsible. I cannot accept intelligent design as Mayer presents it. Further issue. That was a quote from David Goodlertner, by the way. All molecules contain DNA, as we know, which is information at a nucleotide basis. We showed this the nucleotide within the cell in our diagram of last week that determines molecular function. Wherever you find any form of code, it always points to a mind, not to a material process. The evolutionary process issue, the odds are just too overwhelming against it. Makes even more infinitely unlikely. And I like that point of more infinitely unlikely. So what we're saying is the more and more evidence we have through science, the calculation of it being true for an evolutionary process is becoming even more unlikely. It's not supporting and adding additional weight that the evolutionary process is feasible or more feasible. It's actually doing the complete opposite. It's saying that it's even more unlikely. Molecular forms only points to a cause of intelligence, even at a basic molecular cell. Like we mentioned, we have a single cell. We don't have a two-cell form or a three molecular cell form. And yet within that single cell, we have just unbelievable level of DNA code. That I said, if you unwrap it all, would be like, tens of kilometers long, just unbelievable level of complexity. And it has to be in a particular order as well. That's the other key point. It's like sophisticated programming code, which actually makes me wonder, and an add point to that, where do we get any evidence that anybody just randomly typing programming code, millions of lines long, is going to end up with some, when you hit run, it's going to do anything? It's just simply not the case, because you have to go back. You have to be so precise, the order, the syntax, the logic, conditional statements, all the different components of your programmable code has to be so precise. Tiniest little mistake, what happens? It doesn't run, it fails, and you have to go back, which I've done in some stuff I used to do. I did some sort of basic coding scripting, which again is incredibly complicated, and you need it precise. If it doesn't, the process doesn't work, it fails. And that's at a very basic level. So you can imagine if you've got millions upon millions of, tens of millions of programming code, it only works if there's intelligence behind it. So, I mean, I'm just flabbergasted how anybody with intelligence can still believe, just because they don't want to believe in a God, run with this evolutionary atheist point of view. It's just so absurd, it's ridiculous. Now, that doesn't mean that's the evidence for God, because you can't prove there isn't a God. But that's what Friday night does. We can prove there's a God. We actually will do some evidence on this stream, but the more you want to talk about that from a biblical point of view, the Christian position, we have that on a Friday. You're more than welcome to jump on, you atheists who want to challenge the reason why we believe there's a God. That's the stream for that. But we will cover one aspect, which we will do one week, and that is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The reason why we're going to cover it on here is because it is physical evidence that an atheist cannot deny. The material world is one of the main components of an atheist. Evidence is based on what they call the real world. And the real world is, of course, based on what we see around us, which can be examinable, observable, and testable. Even within that limited realm, because we know not everything can be. I mean, my consciousness, the proof that I have love in me, cannot be proved by scientific method. So scientists has its limitations, but within its limited fields, it does provide support to the evidence of a creator and intelligent design. It doesn't have to be necessarily God at this stage, but if you can at least believe that the best evidence is that there's intelligent design, you're one step closer to believing there is a God, and we'll be happy to help you take the next steps. As I said, from believing there is a intelligent design, it has to be an intelligent mind behind the universe, because of all the evidence we've got, which is now overwhelming. How can we then say what that intelligent design is? And that's a fair point. There are many, many religions out there that have views that this is the God that created all things, but we clearly see that many of these claims are on the basis of a false God, not a God that's real. We need a way of proving the intelligent mind that we believe in and have come to the conclusion of is a God that's real. What's that step to prove that? And that's the second step, which we won't cover in its true sense here, because this is not the stream for that, but we will cover it on a Friday. So please, if you want to start having a better case for why we believe that the Christian God is the only true God exists, and what evidence we've got for that, then please do join tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, same time as this stream, and that is covered every Friday night. So we are just so, like, I mean, for me, my journey of trying to understand when I took on this stream was I had some questions as well, and I think the evidence I've now researched has been phenomenal in the evidence that there is an intelligent design, that things cannot just come by chance. It's just too stupid and ridiculous to believe in it. So why would you put your life on the line? And this is where it gets interesting. If you believe that this is all come by just pure random mutational processes, then you've got no guarantee of anything that would happen to you after you grow old and die. And if you're unlucky to have a short life because maybe you were unfortunately in an incident where you get killed by somebody at a young age, and we've seen many examples of people's lives being lost at a very young age. And if that's all there is to this world, then this is a very, very sad world to live in. But if this is all there is, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Why even should we have feelings? Why we should have such care and love for everybody if it's on such a fragile basis? But if there was more to life, if there was a real purpose for life, then all these kind of qualities will make more sense. So I would say at least it's worth exploring. And thank you, Unique, for putting those reminders in. Thank you so much. We have some fantastic people on this site, I must admit. So great in how you support us. We do not underestimate the value you add. So it's a big, huge thanks, guys and ladies, that they've been supporting us. I'm not sure what's happened to Cherokee Gypsy. I hope she's okay. If anybody knows if she's all right, please let us know. I hope she's well. But the rest of you guys, just, absolute 10 I have you. And, we stream wouldn't be anywhere near as good as it is without your support. So thank you as always in this. But what really amazes me, as I said, the case for God is not just a fact that we can prove that everything does come from intelligent design, but it comes from a God that loves us, a God that cares for us, and does offer us more than this life. There is more to this life. There's a promise that if we believe in him and we believe in what he's done through his son, we will receive a promise that will be far greater than what we have as our life today. All we would need to do is take some time from you to explore that. Give us the opportunity to just take some small amount of your time, even if it's just a few hours, just to at least explore that. Would that not be worth it? And when you think about all the hours you spend on frivolous things, whether it's gambling, whatever it may be, what is a few hours, 2-3 hours worth if it's in the pursuit of something really, really far greater? As I say, we are providing that not only on a Friday night, but for those who really, really search for God, search for truth. And here's the beauty of this. And when through that search, they find a genuine case that God is real. Now, I have done that in my life. When I prayed for God to reveal himself, he did in an incredibly powerful way. And at some point, I will provide my testimony if you want to hear it. But it's that evidence, which is not just me, but it's millions upon millions of Christians have this evidence. No religion can have and support this kind of claim, because it's only the Christians that truly believe the true God. And that is because we believe what the scriptures say, which is the evidence of all the records of manuscripts that existed thousands of years, that basically existed very early on. And of course, if God is going to reveal himself, he's going to do it early on. He ain't going to wait 5,000 years and start revealing himself. He's going to reveal himself very early on. And the only records we got of such comprehensive evidence of information that would suggest comes from a God is what we see in the Bible. It's the only book that provides this. And with that, coupled with, as I said, the testimony, personal evidence of God in our lives, a genuine connection in our lives. I've been healed by God on the spot. which, there's no scientific way or medical way that could have even been possible. And I'm just one of millions that have had similar testimonies. And there have been many, many more. There are prophecies in scripture about miraculous events that have been then proven to be true. You just cannot make those kind of prophecies as a human. So there's got to be some supernatural intervention. And again, without going into too much of that, that's what Friday is all about. That's the stream for that. But that's why we're doing this, because we have such an incredible case for God and the God of the Bible, which is what is the Christian view. Now, Jews, of course, have a similar view. The only sad thing, they have got what we believe have gone astray. They haven't fully understood their scriptures, because they were Jews originally from the time of when the original prophets and all the main characters described in the early chapters of the Bible, they were around that time. They were alive when Jesus was alive. They were alive when many of the prophets and disciples, etc., were alive. And yet they don't read their Old Testament scriptures well enough to see what it's really saying, the way it points to Christ, the way it identifies Christ, and the way it identifies and understands who God really is. They just are just blinded from it. Not all, of course. Many Jews have become what we call Messianic Jews, and it's usually the result of their more closer and honest reading of scriptures. They start to realize, like in Isaiah 53 and so on, Daniel 7, Daniel 10, Daniel 9, Isaiah 48, list goes on, where we have clear evidence of who Christ is and who God is, that it's not what the Jewish position is, it's the Christian position. So we do really encourage people to look into that. And if you want more details, then please do join the stream tomorrow. Rest of all, what are we saying here? We take seriously to make sure our car, house, medical insurances are up to date. That's a great point. How much more is the insurance of life? Oh, that is such a great point. Absolute gem, that. Absolutely very good point. If you want insurance for your eternal life, how much more important is that? And that's one of the reasons why we are bringing up Christ, because if Christ is a real person, which we have superb evidence that is the case, so we have no doubts. If atheists could just spend 1 minute doing a bit of evidence or whatever minutes they need to do to look into research this, they will find that Jesus is clearly a genuine individual that existed, and existed around the time as mentioned in the Holy Bible. But also the fact he was crucified. The evidence is just huge. And he's one of the most attested historical figures of all time. That's how powerful and significant the evidence is. And that also includes the fact that he was witnessed to be alive after 3 days of his crucifixion. He wasn't just crucified. He was put in a tomb. He was guarded by the guards with a very, very tight schedule. The reason why that is, just to put you in the picture, is a lot of the disciples and other individuals and Jews around them were many claims around that Jesus will come alive and Jesus will return and so on, whatever way they phrase it. So they wanted to make sure, because of all, on top of all that, all the shift of focus on him than on the Roman Empire and their leadership, that they really wanted to make sure that Jesus was dead. So they went to the absolute extra mile to make absolutely certain, under normal natural circumstances, nobody could survive a crucifixion. And that they put a sword in as well near the end, and they took him off the cross, clearly with all the evidence that they needed, that he was clearly dead. And then, of course, brought him into the tomb to make absolutely certain that leave him in there for the time they did, and they guarded it to make sure. But what got very interesting was when they opened the tomb eventually, not only did they have trouble providing the evidence that he was still dead, they actually couldn't even find him. The tomb was empty. So this is, again, extremely powerful evidence of the miraculous supernatural event of Christ. Not just that he was not in the tomb, which just cannot be explained by the Roman Empire because of all the strict guards that they had and all the records they kept of confirming how he was crucified, how he was guarded, and ensured that there's no way that body could have been ever removed, to make there's no chance of any way he could somehow be put back to life. If there was some outside chance, maybe he wasn't 100% dead. They just wanted to make absolutely certain, and that's why they kept him in the tomb. But when they opened it up, he wasn't there, and that's incredibly powerful evidence, which the Romans, amongst other historians, had to document and did document as a very profound event, which were then followed by the final event of all, which we will cover one week, and that is that there was incredibly strong evidence by many witnesses that Jesus was alive after 3 days. So again, this is the strong evidence we're going to cover in the near future. So checking any more comments that are coming through. What have we got? Get in touch with the channel, please. Yeah. Thank you, Unique. If you do want to get in touch with us, there's our email address, info@operationstephen.org. We welcome everybody that wants to and are interested in our ministry, or interested in any of the challenges, or want to discuss any topic, or wanting more information, then by all means you can email us at that address. And on our last closing note, I don't think anyone's going to join, so we will close early now at 9:30, just to say, what the words that are in the Holy Bible make profound statements, and those profound statements can be backed by incredible evidence, whether it's archaeologically, in some cases through history. They also can be proved through testimony of many Christians that have had Christ in their lives. And this is the, if you like, compounded case for Christ. And that's the reason why we do it. We're not doing this for fun. We're doing this for free. We do not get paid for this service. We do not ask for money. We do this purely out of genuine love for everybody, that we would want everybody to receive the same free gift of eternal life that God has offered to all those who believe in him. All we need to do is go through the steps to make that journey, to make that inquiry, and we highly recommend you do so. It doesn't take a long time out of your life. I like that point here, Cold Case for Christianity. There is actually a book called Cold Case for Christianity. I don't know if that's the one you're mentioning there, Unique. I forgot it was by now. It could be Lee Strobel. But there is a Cold Case for Christ. And this is where I highly recommend, do your research. Don't just rely on what I'm coming through. I will provide more and more evidence. I will start to make some references as well, so you can look it up. I will happily provide more and more information to why we have, even from a scientific point of view, a genuine case that the Earth and the universe can only be thousands of years, not millions. Why we believe it has to be by intelligence through the processes that we are aware of, and any other process that's without intelligence is just too close to impossible to be feasible option. So on that note, we will close. Thank you again for everybody that's been in the comments, providing your support. Thank you, Unique. Rest a while, y'all. I like that name. Who else we got here? Brother Space Gaming. Interesting topic. If you are a Christian, that's great news. And hope you are in the Brother Knight. Who else we got? So with T. I'm just trying to remember now. John Mark, welcome. Thank you for your comments. Who am I missing? Give me a second. There's so many comments. Anybody else that's been there? So I do apologize if I missed anybody's name. Josh was one other. Tinny D, I think, was another. And if I have missed anyone, I do apologize. But just a big thank you to you all. Have a great evening. Hope you've enjoyed the show. And Atheist, come on, you really are disappointing me a bit. You're really not coming forward with some great cases at all. But we are really keen for you to still come on board. We have a love for you as individuals, as humans. And that's why we care about you, and that's why we still want you on board to discuss this, because we think it's worth it. So again, thank you for all those joined, and look forward to next week. And have a great evening and a great rest of your day. Welcome, and God bless you all.